Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Three Principles Global Community webinar. The Three Principles Global Community, also known as 3PGC, is a nonprofit organization that's committed to bringing an understanding of the three principles to people throughout the world. And if you'd like to learn more, if this is new to you, you can go to 3pgc.org and learn more, and also sign up on the website as a member to get our newsletters. So today we are very fortunate to have John El-Mokadem with us. John is a breakthrough coach and works with individuals that are stuck and seeking a change in their life. He's been around the principles for the last 5 years and has learned from a number of 3P teachers, including Dicken Bettinger, Keith Blevens, Barb Patterson, and the Pranskys. He was an apprentice to Michael Neill and is a certified advanced transformation coach. But perhaps most importantly, underneath all the labels, John is a human being who has lived in struggle like all of us do. He sees his struggles as a gift these days, an opportunity to open up and understand more about what this life is and to share what he has learned to help others to live happier lives. So John, I am so pleased that you agreed to join us on the webinar today. And I just want to say I had the opportunity to meet John a week and a half ago at the 3PGC conference, and it was completely my pleasure. And I'm really excited to hear what you have to say.
Oh, bless you, Bonnie. Thank you very much. I feel very much the same as well. Hello, everybody. It's really nice to be invited here. I had one of those moments when I kind of looked at the title of this talk and I was like, what was I thinking when I came up with the title? And, you know, when you kind of try and think back what was on your mind. But I thought I'd just show up and share whatever was kind of fresh for me here. And, you know, the thing that kind of occurred to me now that Bonnie's talking about the 3PGC was the sort of the conference that I just attended was very different to the first one that I went to back in 2014. And it was the most noticeable thing for me about that conference. And what I noticed was different was I went into it, and for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel like there was something I needed to get from going to that conference. You know, there was just this part of me that was just feeling so much more okay with myself and so much more clearer about where what I, you know, needed was going to come from. And it was such a stark difference to how it was in 2014, where I was literally going through, you know, so which talk am I going to see and who's the best one and what topics are the most thing. And there was so much noise and thinking and trying to figure it all out. And I just remember coming to the end of that kind of process and the end of my apprenticeship in 2014 and just sort of realizing that all of these talks and all of this content that I was listening to was just basically pointing me within. It was basically pointing me to something that was already there. And so I suppose one of the things that's kind of, you know, has been my learning with this has just been sort of seeing that whatever it is that we seek in life, the answer to it is always to look towards the principles and having a deeper understanding of it. And what I thought I'd do is just share a couple of stories and anecdotes. And I've got quite a lot of them, so I'll probably stop at some point and open up and see what you guys are hearing and what you'd like to hear more or less of, and we take it from there. But the thing that really started it for me was this, years ago, I had this real discomfort in life just generally. You know, I was working in an IT career and I was pretty good at the IT career, but I was really, really miserable. And I had had this ongoing issue with a relationship with the person that's now my wife, but we've been together for 20 years. And 10 years of that was probably 50 different relationships as I tried to figure out how the heck to be in a relationship to someone. And so I came out of the IT career and thinking that there was something else that I should be doing. And then I started trying to figure out, you know, what on earth was going on with this relationship. And I noticed that I would go in and out of being connected with my wife or my girlfriend at the time. And I would have these moments when I was just really, really lost in, you know, in ideas about what I thought I needed in a relationship to be okay. And I'd come from a sort of mixed Middle Eastern background, you know, English and Egyptian background. And I had, you know, quite strong ideas given to me about what it was that you needed to have a happy relationship. So I was constantly finding myself in this battle of sort of comparing what I had to what I thought I should have. And of course, in those moments when, you know, I was looking at what I thought I should have, I was experiencing disconnection to my girlfriend at the time, and then thinking, oh, well, I need to change the relationship, you know, and I need to go somewhere else. I pull in and out. And yet there was this kind of flip side of it where, you know, I would have these moments where I wouldn't be in my head at all. And my wife was really good. She was always much wiser than me, probably still is now I think about it. But she was always able to notice when I was in that place of just being there with her. And she would acknowledge it by saying, hello, you. Now, at the time, that used to scare the crap out of me, because I was suddenly like, oh, God, I'm getting close. And what does this mean? And, you know, how am I going to make it all work? So the minute she would say that would be the minute I'd go back up into my head again, start trying to figure it all out. And, you know, I'd get myself all in a mess. And I suppose just, you know, as I started to learn about, you know, what we point to with this conversation, I just started to see that actually the problem was not so much the relationship. The problem was that sometimes I just got lost in a lot of noise in my head. And when I did, I experienced disconnection. And as long as I was just seeing it for what it was, then it wasn't really a problem. It was just kind of normal. I would go in and out of it, and, you know, that would be it. And so, you know, when I started to glimpse that this was what was going on, I actually found myself committing more to the relationship. And it was funny because I'd had all these kind of scary thoughts about what was going to happen if I committed. And what I noticed was that, yeah, stuff happened in our relationship that was difficult and, you know, hard to navigate at times. But none of that stuff was the stuff that I thought was going to happen. So I started to see that actually my thinking didn't really contain any useful information about what was really going to happen. All it did was occasionally give me this experience of, you know, feeling certain ways. And, you know, and the more lost I was in it, the more I could experience disconnection. But it wasn't actually telling me anything about my relationship per se. So that was kind of the first thing, you know, that happened. And then, you know, I was thinking about what else is it that we kind of seek? You know, what is it that we seek in life? You know, I suppose the other thing for me was, you know, I'd always wanted to do well. And, you know, for a long time, I'd engaged with these kind of, you know, Tony Robbins sort of, you know, goal setting and, you know, you just got to set goals and, you know, then you can find your route to success. And I remember at one point in my life, I basically had goals for everything. You know, you name it, there was a goal. You know, relationships, health, you know, money, what I wanted to do for my job. There was just a goal everywhere. And I started to notice something, and that thing was that sometimes the things that I tried to create seemed to happen really easily. And sometimes the things that I tried to create, it didn't seem to matter what I did, they just didn't happen. And then there were these other things that just kind of happened and they weren't even on my radar. And I was like, how effective is this actually at helping me to create? What's really going on here? And then one day I kind of woke up just feeling really miserable. And I looked at all these goals that I had for my life. And I was like, well, every single one of these things is telling me that in order to be okay, I'm basically deferring it to some point in the future when this thing's going to happen. So this is why I'm feeling really miserable, because none of it's actually happening. So that just seems like a really dumb recipe to be happy. You know, it wasn't making me happy at all. It's why I really thought, I'll create all this stuff and then I'll be happy. Well, that means I defer being happy for the entire time that looks real. And since I'm not in control of half of it, there's a really good chance I'm never going to be fully happy because I'm not going to make some of this stuff happen. So in that moment, I just was like, okay, maybe this just doesn't work this way. And I started to just kind of not get so lost in that stuff. And that was when I really started to see, that there is this inherent creativity to life, that there's something at work that is despite my idea of myself. And the more I started to see this, the more I started to find that actually I could create so much better when I wasn't trying to find my well-being in a set of outcomes and circumstances. So one day I remember after I'd got married, I'd been trying for so long to create a coaching career and a coaching practice. And I hadn't had a lot of success. And one day I talked to my wife about it, and she said to me, well, why don't you go back to IT? You're good at that. And my answer to her at the time was, oh, I can't be happy doing IT. But the funny thing was, at that point, I had an understanding of the principles. So I was like, okay, there's something not quite right about what I just said there. That doesn't sound true anymore. So because it looked a bit fuzzy, I started opening up to the possibility that actually I was wrong. And I literally found in front of me an IT project, literally sitting in front of me. So I was like, okay, let's give it a shot. So I went back to this IT project, and lo and behold, I found myself enjoying it. Probably because my experience had nothing to do with the IT project and had a lot to do with my mind. So I found myself enjoying it. But the strange thing was, I started having coaching conversations with people, but no longer with any pressure to build a practice. And I was having these conversations with people, and then people started asking me, oh, hey, do you do this? Is this something you could do more of with me? And I started finding that I had suddenly people signing up to become coaching clients, and I wasn't even trying. And it made me realize what had been going on for so long when I tried to create a coaching practice. And the problem was that I really thought my life was going to be better if I had this coaching practice. So I'd really put my well-being on having a coaching practice. And what it meant was that when I went into a conversation with people, the feeling was just off. It might have looked like I was trying to help people. And on some level, I really was. But actually, what was coming across on the feeling level was, please become my client and pay me money so I can feel better about my life, and then everything will be okay. Well, no one wants to buy that, especially coaching. They're coming to you because they're looking for well-being on some level. Despite how they might dress it up, that's actually what they're looking for. Well, I wasn't in that space because I was too busy thinking that there was a form that things had to take in order for me to be okay. So what happened when I went back to IT was I was having conversations with people, but there was nothing on it anymore. And lo and behold, the feeling was so much richer. People were picking up on where I was coming from. And obviously they were getting a lot more from it than they were before. There's another kind of aspect to this in terms of creativity. And I suppose I started seeing it in first when I was working in IT. And it was, where the kind of problem solver really is. It ties into what I've been speaking to, I suppose. But, what I did in my IT career at the beginning was I was a performance troubleshooter. And something I kind of fell into, because one day I had a spare afternoon and my boss said to me that there was this software project that was having difficulty. And he said, oh, can you just go and help them? And my initial reaction was, what on earth am I going to do to help these guys? They built the thing, so they know more than me. So, what am I going to do? But anyway, I went along to see these guys. And, now I look back, the thing that really stands out for me was just how up in their head these guys were. They were so full of worry about their jobs, about what the client was going to say, about, what some of them were contractors and they were thinking, oh, well, what's my next job going to be? I'm going to get fired because this whole thing is going to fall to pieces. Just really, really in fearful thinking, but really bright guys as well, And I walked in not even knowing half as much as these people. And yet I surprised myself in the state of mind I was in. I was able to help these guys find a solution to what was going on. And it was a real shock to me because I was like, well, how does that work? These guys have more knowledge than me, yet somehow I can walk in and help them see something that they can't see themselves. The thing was, after this, I kind of got labeled, and my boss said, oh, well, you've clearly got a knack for this. So he starts sending me into other projects. And I wasn't always the one that solved it. But what I started to notice was that there was a bit of a pattern. And a lot of the time, it would be me that would come up with the way forward. But sometimes it'd be something on the project team. And there was always something that was really noticeable about when they would start to come up with new solutions and new thinking. And it was typically don't know what that was. It was typically late at night, when we'd given up, we're all having a late night curry in the office, not even thinking about it. And then all of a sudden, one of the guys would go, oh, hang on a minute. What about this? Or what about that? And they'd come up with a new way of looking at the problem or a new solution to what was in front of us. And it made me realize, it's something that's really stood out for me, having been in this conversation for so long, that actually it's not my job to come up with new solutions. New solutions come through me when I'm seeing that it's not my job to come up with them, right? So when I can see that actually I really am okay, and that the only thing that takes me away from that is getting lost in this idea of myself and who I think I am, well, I actually open up more to this space of creativity, and it's kind of natural and it's working through me all the time. I suppose one of the other things, if we're talking about, why this is kind of the direction for everything, the biggest thing for me in recent times has been seeing how much of an effect this conversation has actually had on my health. In fact, I had a webinar that I did earlier about this. And in 2007, I got ill with something. Never did quite understand what it was, other than they just told me it was a really bad virus or bug of some kind. And I ended up in this situation with chronic fatigue. And it was something that kind of went on in one form or another for about 7 years. But at its worst, I was, hospitalized for 3 months, pretty much unable to do anything whatsoever. And I started to make an improvement over that period of time. So by 2008, I was sort of functional, but with a lot of symptoms still knocking around, a lot of fatigue and all sorts knocking around. And it was something I kind of just resigned myself to the fact that was probably going to be around in one form or another, forever. But in 2014, when I did my apprenticeship with Michael, I at the time I had this problem with heat intolerance and sunlight intolerance. And I couldn't go out into the heat or the sun for any length of time without feeling, really burned, very dizzy, quite nauseous. I'd get these really bad headaches, and it would come on really quickly. And I'd had every test under the sun, and no one had found anything. So I had this conversation with Michael, and his first reaction was, well, maybe you're just a vampire, which is not terribly helpful, but quite funny. And then he said to me, well, maybe this is the power of thought to create your experience. At which point I swore at him and told him where to go. But there was something about what he'd said that had just, I don't know, I was like, well, I wonder. Because at that point, I'd already seen quite a lot into this. It's like, well, I wonder what's going on here too. So I went and saw this holistic doctor who was like a coach stroke nutritionist stroke physician. And again, he ran all of these kind of tests on me. And the tests that he did were like adrenal stress tests. And I got the results back, and my cortisol levels are really high. Now, for those of you that don't know, cortisol is like your stress hormone. So it's something that happens when the body is in a stress state. And what the doctor said to me was, my cortisol levels are really high, but my other hormones were on the floor. And he said, well, this is why you're in this fatigue state, because he said, when you're in a stress state, your body prioritizes cortisol over everything else because you need it to live. And the same building blocks that are in cortisol are in these other hormones as well. So it's prioritized cortisol, and the others that are on the floor. This is why you're tired. And he also ran a nutritional panel on me, which was all green. So I was supplementing a lot at the time. And he said, well, this is why you're not completely on the floor, because although your metabolism's running really fast, you know, you're giving yourself the building blocks. So your body's able to sustain some kind of function. But the thing that was interesting for me was knowing that cortisol was a stress hormone. I was like, well, what am I stressed about? What's going on here? What's causing that? And I had this understanding of the principles, and I started to see, oh, hang on a minute. The stress isn't outside of me. This is telling me what's going on inside my head. And I started to notice just how much time I spent ruminating over everything. But in particular, if I knew I had to go out in the sunlight and the heat, oh my goodness, I could waste a lot of time going over and over again and trying to figure out, you know, what to do about it and how I was going to make sure I'd be okay, and, you know, what I would do if I had a funny turn and all sorts of stuff like that. So when I saw that, I remembered Michael's words, you know, this is the power of thought to create your experience. And I suddenly realized that what I was doing was I was doing this to me. You know, I was getting so lost in all this worrying thoughts that I was actually creating a stress that was depleting my body and having all kinds of effects on it. So when I saw that, it just stopped having so much of a hold on me. And I found within 3 weeks, the heat and sunlight intolerance just kind of disappeared, because I started going out, but I just wasn't so bought into the worry anymore. You know, I kind of saw what was going on. So within 3 weeks, that had kind of gone. And then by 8 weeks, all of the symptoms had just sort of disappeared, completely gone. And it was just from having this understanding of the relationship between being lost in my mind and what that did physiologically to my body and its biology. Now, that has been an amazing experience for me, because ever since having that, I've had the privilege of being able to work with people who have chronic fatigue. And, you know, I recently worked with a lady who'd been ill for 23 years with this. And by sharing the principles with her and what I'd learned about it, she was able to make a full recovery in 2 months. There was another lady that I worked with who was a young teenage girl. She was down to a 26% attendance rate at school. And she was actually the first person that I worked with. And I worked with her really reluctantly, to be honest with you, because there was this part of me that just didn't quite believe that what I'd seen was universal. But I met her because we bought a house, and her grandparents owned the house and told me about her plight. And when I heard about it and just how sick she was, I was just like, well, what's the worst I can do? You know, I can lend a comfortable ear and be nice and just try my best. But she got to a point where she got fully back to school. You know, she's doing a job. She passed her exams. She goes out partying like any normal teenager does. And she'd basically been written off by the medical establishment. They said, we can't help you. We're going to send you to a special school which combines medicine and education. So, you know, that has been one of the most, I suppose, profound learnings for me, that actually, you know, even this understanding can have an effect on us, on our physical well-being, as well as our mental well-being. And I'm now in the process of looking to see, maybe I can do some research on this to help to try and spread the principles within this context, but also to give us some more quantitative data to maybe open up some of these kind of establishments to looking at, the validity and usefulness of the principles. I've rabbited on for about 25 minutes there. There's more I could say, but I'm curious, anyone got anything that's coming up for them, or anything they'd like to talk about or share? Or how's this work, Bonnie?
I'm just going to remind everyone, you can unmute yourself by either clicking the little microphone on the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, or if you have the participant window up, you can unmute yourself there as well.
What's coming up for people?
Hello?
Hello.
Hi,
Who's that?
Hi, John. Hi, Bonnie.
Oh, hi. How are you doing?
My head is disappearing, is it? Oh, right, there we are. Yeah, I was one of your clients as well. And what you've done to me, which is quite strange, which is lovely actually, you've slowed me right down.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it slowed me right down, and it made me think of Joe Bailey's book, Slowing Down to the Speed of Love.
Yeah.
And so what it's done is given me a very different experience of sleep. And the quality of sleep is very, very different.
Wow, okay.
I'm getting more sleep as well. And in fact, I don't want to get up in the morning. I can sleep all day. But that's what seems to be happening. And I was talking to my, because as you know, I have acupuncture as well. And I was talking to him, and he's tried to discharge me because I don't think I need to see you again, he said, because I don't know what your friend has done, but he's flicked a switch. And he's changed my DNA, and everything's changed, working differently. So he said, I don't think you need to come see me again. I am going to see you next week, actually. I said, I'll see you one more time.
Wow.
And that's quite interesting, actually. Yeah.
So this was after one conversation that we'd had previously, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And are you conscious of anything that you kind of saw differently, or?
Not really. I know when you were talking to me, I felt like all this tingling was coming through me at one point. So I knew something was happening, but I didn't know what. But sort of mentally, if you like, or emotionally, I don't feel any difference. But obviously, I am. There's something very different going on there. But, for years and years before, I was very stressed for a very long time. And, up to about 10 years ago, I think, although I was working very hard and in a very intense occupation, really, I had lots of patients all day, every day. And most of the time, I wasn't sleeping at all at night. And I think my body's got into that cycle of not sleeping, not resting properly, not recovering well. And I think all of a sudden you flick the switch on that, and that's what it feels like.
That's really beautiful, and I totally was unaware as well.
I know. I've been meaning to email you and have another chat with you just to let you know. And I thought, I'm going to catch you because you need, it's nice for other people to know as well. That's the thing.
Yeah, I mean, I love the share, because I think for me, what I noticed, one of the things that this conversation's given me is just really seeing that there isn't somewhere I'm going to get to that's better than here, right? Yeah. So I can have that as an experience. My mind is constantly making up somewhere that's better than here all the time, particularly when it comes to my kids, I have to say. But I know that there's nothing in that. I know that yes, I'm going to have my feeling around it, but it isn't telling me data about my life. And the more I see that, the more I just find myself resting more into the present and just being slower. Just as a natural byproduct of that, I mean, it's funny, just even doing these talks, this is the second talk I've done today. Not so long ago, the prospect of doing one talk in a day would have been pretty nerve-wracking for me. But, I think that's the other thing as well, is I realize it's not up to me to do this. I see that actually there's something working through me, and it's just kind of my job to show up and let that thing work through me. And you know what? It just does a much better job than John ever did. John was pretty rubbish at that stuff. And I think that's the thing, you know, when we see we're here, this is it. And when we see that there is just that natural creativity to life and it works through us, oh my gosh, life just gets easier. It's just simpler.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome. Looking forward to the next chat. We'll see what happens then.
Well, yeah, let's see what opens up now. Brilliant.
Oh, thank you, John.
No problem at all. Who else is on and might want to share something, even if it's something you want some help with, or?
How, can you hear me?
Yes, hello. Hi, Sharon.
Oh, wow. Hey, how you doing? I've never used one of these before.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you so much. It's so interesting because I saw this webinar pop up and I haven't done a webinar before. I had to download the app and everything. It's kind of exciting. But I saw it pop up and I thought my reason for getting on, and maybe it is too, was the election results here in the States. I've had nightmares and just been really watching my thoughts, you know, I really have to give up my family and my relationship and my friends and leave the country, you know, and then knowing that, you know, I'm in this life for spiritual peace, and this is like such an opportunity to stay present and find peace. And I had the insight the other day that, because I don't know what's coming, we never know what's coming, right? And so I had the insight the other day, you know, people live in terrifying places all the time and love and have peace, and you know, so this is an opportunity to kind of find to maintain that. And so anyway, that's why I thought that I was getting on the webinar, was just for, like, I think extra support and a dose of that.
Yeah.
But and I do think there's, you know, I do feel that, you know, I was up in the middle of the night for hours last night again. But I just want to say also, it was just so bizarre because I have almost the same illness story as you, even to the dates, like 2006, 2007 for 7 years, and then still some. And I've been noticing that my thing is standing up. My blood pressure drops, and I sometimes fall over. So I have this life now where I can't really stand. I can walk, I can move, but if I stand still, it's a problem, and it's kind of been affecting everything. And so I just finally, like after all this time, got some meds and managed to pick them up yesterday, which was challenging because I couldn't stand in line, and was just going to start them today. But I also had been noticing the whole time, and I don't want to dominate this, I'll be wrapping it up, but I've been noticing this whole time that when I stand, I have the thought, oh, you know, like, how much longer can I stand? You know, I have anxious thoughts about it. I think the way that you being out in the sun did. And wondering, like, how much, I know something's going on physically, but how much of that could I clear by, you know, like having insight or consciousness around it being accentuated by my thinking around it. And I don't like taking meds. And so, like, all of a sudden now I'm like, oh, should I try a little bit longer? I mean, I've been noticing things and working with that a little bit. But it was just really interesting timing to turn on this webinar for that reason, and then like, oh, whoa, that's like almost my story. Yeah.
I can share something a little about my experience, that if it helps. I mean, I had something very similar as part of what was going on with me, and it was labeled as something called POTS. I don't know if you've heard that. Postural static tachycardic syndrome, I think.
Yeah, that's what I'm probably.
Something like that. Yeah, and I noticed exactly what you're pointing to, which was, you know, I mean, part of my journey when I got sick was I collapsed through a glass shower door. And it was when I was at my most depleted. And, you know, I woke up to seeing my pregnant wife screaming on the phone to the paramedics, sort of saying my husband's fitting and this sort of stuff. So I had a lot on fainting and, you know, passing out. And so I used to monitor it a lot. And Yeah, I mean, it does look to me like when I was in all of that, it did seem to make it more real for me. And then at one point, I actually just noticed how many times have I actually fainted in my life? And it was those 2 times. I had never fainted any other time. And it was like, well, maybe the feeling of fainting is coming from the fact that I'm fearing fainting.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, when you get in a fearful place and you get panicky, you can feel faint. It's like part of a panic attack.
Right.
And that was how it was for me. Now, I'm not saying there isn't something underlying with you. I'm just saying that it can be very powerful. This thought, feeling, and physiological connection can be extremely powerful.
Yeah, I believe it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know.
And it's interesting because then the heart races, it feels exactly like anxiety, you know, from standing, just when the heart races from the blood pressure, it feels exactly like anxiety. And I think comes with all the mental anxiety. So they get kind of mixed together.
That's right.
So, yeah. So I guess this is just like inspirational for revisiting, maybe with a little bit more confidence, you know.
Yeah. I mean,
looking
I'm not
into
saying that there's nothing there, but certainly open up to the possibility that by seeing more around this, it could create some change here for you. Definitely. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Not at all. No, thanks for jumping on the call.
Thank you.
No, you're welcome. Anybody else? No?
Hi, John.
Who's that? Hello. Hi. Hi, I can't see your name. What's your name?
Kristen.
Oh, Kristen. Hi. How are you doing?
Good.
Nice to meet you.
I also was really interested with your story, seeing parallels. I also come from an IT background.
Uh-huh.
And just, definitely, well, it's been a long time now, but throughout that had a lot of thinking about, well, this isn't making me happy. If I find sort of my calling, I find, you know, sort of the job that I'm supposed to be doing, and then that will make me happy. But yeah, I've been really doing a lot of searching. So after the birth of my first child, I just decided, okay, I'm not going back to IB. And I ended up training in holistic body work, and so that's what I've been doing.
Mm-hmm.
But I am finding that I've been trying to grow a business for so long, and it's not happening. It's not So now I'm trying to I guess step back and figure out what I should be doing there. And I can see that I'm probably having a lot of thought about it. I'm trying to force things. And I don't know what my question is here. I guess
I mean, I can talk around what you're saying a little bit and see if something comes up. But I think the thing that I started to see was that actually I was okay. There was the potential for me to be okay doing anything, right? You know, when I understand how my mind works, where my experience comes from, then, you know, I might have moments when I feel like, oh no, I can't do that. But actually, that can be transitory too, right? Sometimes it just takes a bit of time for our mind to catch up with things. Yeah. It's like, you know, I was just thinking when we moved house last year, you know, we moved into this new town, new place, we had a building project to do. Then we woke up the next morning and the two of us, me and my wife, we just kind of cried. It was like, what on earth have we done? Why have we moved here? But the thing that really helped me was just knowing that all that was going on was just, it was taking time for my mind to catch up. And the more I could just see that that was all that was going on, well, the quicker it just adjusted. And I started to see, oh, well, I can be okay here too. And, you know, we can do what we got to do here too. And I think it's the same for everything we do in life, is that actually the more we understand these principles, the more it doesn't take stuff off the table. It actually shows us what's on the table. It shows us the infinite possibility of what's on the table. And actually, it's my ideas about how the form should look that tend to get in the way of that creativity.
Yeah.
And that's why I find that that I seem to be better at creation now than I ever was, because before, creation looked like it was something that was my job. So me as in separate from mind. But actually, you know what? It doesn't work that way, because the John that was trying to create was a creation itself of mind. It was a bundle of thoughts that were created by mind. So how is that going to have much creative ability? Well, it's not. So the more I see that actually I don't need to pay attention to this to be okay, the more I'm in alignment with the creative force of life itself. And that builds galaxies. You know? So if I want to create something, it's good to know what actually does the creating. And it's good for me to be able to see what gets in the way of that. I don't know if that's any help or resonant in any way.
Yeah, it definitely does, and I think probably what you know, whether my holistic healing practice will ever be sort of my full-time work, I don't know, but I think the key probably for me right now is that I do have to kind of let it go and step back, find some other work just to pay the bills, and then see what comes from that. You know, if maybe that shift, if I stop sort of gripping to it, thought that, you know, this is my life's work and this is the only thing that's going to make me happy, then I could find that it shows up in another way.
Yeah.
And I'm very interested to hear what you were saying about how your observances with your three principles understanding and how it can affect on a physical level. So that sort of making me curious as to, you know, I'm not envisioning myself shifting over to coaching, but just in what I can add to my practice as a body worker.
As a healer,
As a healer, because I've always recognized, you know, the mind, body, spirit connection. So is there some way that I can, I don't know, help my clients through the three principles understanding?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things that I don't have an answer to this, but it's something I'm really curious about. You know, how much physical healing can occur by us really beginning to see, you know, this understanding on a deeper level. It's something I'm so curious about. I mean, I remember there was a TED talk that I saw. I'm just struggling to remember the lady's name. Would it be Kelly McGonigal? I think it might have been. And she talks about making stress your friend. And she talks about how, you know, at the root of all illness is stress. And I'm thinking, well, you know, we kind of got that bit covered with the principles, right? That's one of the things we know about and can help people with in a really tangible way. So what healing can occur as a result of that? I mean, Bill Pettit did a great talk, you know, at the 3PGC conference. And he was talking about, you know, the numbers of documented cases of kind of spontaneous just remission of things like cancers and that sort of thing. And I think, you know, it does suggest to me that there is something in us seeing more about this that could be tremendously healing. In fact, funnily enough, I was at a talk last night with the doctor that did these tests with me when I had chronic fatigue. And, you know, he wrote a paper called Disease as a Manifestation of Health. And he goes so far as to say that all disease is an attempt for the body to find well-being. So it's telling you something about your level of disconnection to source, or to mind, if you like. Now, he's got a lot more experience with it with me. I'm not sure I see it anywhere near as deep as he does, but I'm certainly curious how far it could go. So it's a really interesting area for exploration. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing your research project.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for coming on the call. Really appreciate it. Anybody else got any questions or comments or thing you'd like help with? Or
Hello.
hello, who's
Hi,
that?
Julia.
Hi, Julia. How you doing?
I'm good.
Good.
With the exception of the election that happened here in the States 2 days ago. So when I'm in my head and feeling dis-ease, I can tell myself, you know, it's just your thinking, you're in your head, blah, 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 and it doesn't help at all.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't help at all. And, you know, there are millions of people in this country who are feeling bad right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's what I'd say about it. I've started writing a blog about it, and we'll probably publish it in the next 24 hours or so. But the way I see it is people are mourning a loss.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they had in their mind an idea about how life was going to be, and it hasn't worked that way. And it's very human to experience loss, sadness, upset, anguish, frustration, all of the above. It's really, really normal. And it doesn't look to me like, you know, you need to do anything prescriptive with it either. So it's like you say, you can tell yourself you're thinking, as far as I can tell, anytime I've ever done that, I've just ended up even more annoyed. Because it's like, you're basically saying to yourself, well, I'm annoyed and I really shouldn't be annoyed. So let's just get out of it. That would be useful if you had some control, but you don't. The principles live through us. We don't live them. So the way I see it, it's like you're feeling the way you do is just as normal as someone feeling upset at the loss of their mother or father.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's normal. You wouldn't go to them and say, oh, hey, you know what? You really need to principle yourself out of that feeling right now. You just go, hey, yeah, I'm upset, understandably. And yes, it's being caused by the fact that I've got thinking about it. But that doesn't mean that you're exonerated from being human. That's not what this understanding does.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, as far as I can see, I'm probably even more emotional than I ever was now. I just don't care. I want nothing on it anymore. And that's where the freedom is, because when you can genuinely see that all of your emotions are a genuine, sincere, and okay expression of mind, well, actually, you open the door for them to change a lot quicker, right? Because you're no longer getting lost in your thinking that you shouldn't feel that way. And that leaves you more open to new thought and new experiences. So I'm not going to tell you shouldn't feel that way. I'm going to be like, yeah, me too sometimes. And it's absolutely fine that you feel that way. You know, it doesn't limit your ability. The idea that you've got to change it does, because that gets you locked in noise. But you can still live your day. You can still get on with things. And it will change, because that's the nature of the way it works. You know, the nature of the form is for things to change.
Yeah.
Does that help?
It does. We can't hurry it along as much as we want to.
Unfortunately, we're really bad at predicting how long it lasts. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it helps. Thanks.
You're welcome. No problem. Oh, what else have we got? Bonnie, I've got to ask, do you ever pick people on here, or is that a no-no?
Hey, John, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Mike, hi. How you doing?
Great. How are you?
Very well. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you as well. Hey, so I've been going through I had a big life change 6 months ago. Been going through a lot of challenges with anxiety and depression. Started taking some medication. Really feel torn about taking medication. I'm kind of being pushed to, my doctor wants me to see a psychiatrist. I kind of in my heart believe it's, I'm torn. I'm gravitate more towards the principles. You know, you're talking about mind body. You know, I feel like I want to get off this medication and try and do it, try and, you know, take away the side, see what see how I'm really feeling without this crap attached to it. You know, I've been around the principles, and I don't see it for myself right now as clearly as I'd like to, but I believe the answer's in that direction. So just, you know, it's interesting that it's such a dichotomy where society points you in, hey, this is what's wrong with you, and this is what can fix you. And yet I resist that because I truly believe a deeper understanding of the principles or mind or how we function is really the answer. So anyway, I don't know what question. I just would love to hear any wisdom you might have.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I did experience and sometimes do, but although very occasionally now, but I used to get panic attacks a lot.
Yeah.
And, you know, I noticed that the biggest problem with them at the time was with the fatigue thing that I had going on. I used to think that the physical sensations were telling me something was wrong with my body. But that's where I used to create a problem with it. So whenever the feelings of fear would come up and then I'd start feeling the symptoms, I'd start worrying that there was something, you know, heart attack or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And so I'd always be in resistance to that. And the problem with that is that the route to getting through panic attacks and anxiety is acceptance. Well, I wasn't in that place at all because I thought I was ill. So one of the things that really shifted for me was when I really started to see, you know, the kind of health stuff. So when I really saw what was going on with me health-wise, the whole idea that there was something wrong with me when I got the symptoms started to fall away. And not only that, I also started to see, well, what's wrong with anxiety? You know, what's wrong with why is that any less relevant an emotion than any other emotion I would experience? And that was something I just got from just being in this conversation, from just seeing it. It was like, oh, I've made up there's certain emotions that I should be in versus others.
Yeah.
Well, who gave me that idea? Some doctor who's making money off me, you know, taking medication. It doesn't seem to suit me that.
Yeah.
So I just started to get to a point where I wasn't so afraid of having a panic attack. And because of that, it meant that when feelings of fear came up, and even when I got sensations of it, just didn't bother me anymore.
Yeah.
And it meant that if something did come up, well, I just didn't care. And it tended to go quite quickly. But I noticed most of the time, it just didn't come up anymore. You know, it's funny. I had a lady that I saw a couple of weeks ago, and she'd been in therapy for 2 years for depression.
Yeah.
And hadn't really got anywhere with it. And I said just something really simple to her. I said, what's wrong with depression? She said, I get depressed. I don't know anybody that doesn't get depression from time to time.
Yeah.
You know, and it seems to me that the biggest problem with something like depression or anxiety is that someone's out there saying to us that it's something we shouldn't experience.
And it's what we make of it as well. We make a big deal of it. Yeah.
That's right. So certainly in my case, I made up that it meant certain things about my life or my health or whatever else.
Yep.
But as I saw that that wasn't true, and as I saw that actually, you know what, well, I'm not in control of the principles. Sometimes my thinking is going to take a dip. Sometimes I'm going to feel in a low state of mind. That's not a problem. It's just a description of what happens sometimes. And the more I saw that that was okay, well, it's like I said, you know, to the other lady, the other person, that, you know, it creates room for new thinking and a new experience to come, and it's much more fluid. So I'm not in the way with my judgment of how I should be. I'm much more in a space of well-being irrespective of what emotional state I find myself in.
Yeah.
And that for me is what we mean when we talk about the deeper feeling of well-being. It's not kind of this perpetually shiny, positive, happy clappy kind of state.
Yeah.
It's it's a place where we are at peace with everything that comes up emotionally, because we're understanding what it means and where it comes from.
It seems to me it's more being in life rather than managing life.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. If there's one thing that I talk to the chronic fatigue people about, they are so busy managing their energy, right? And so I ask them a question. I'll say, have you had lunch today? And the answer is, well, yeah. So have you digested your food yet? It's like, well, no. Well, why? Well, I can't. Well, how do you manage your energy then? And of course, they start to see, oh, managing my energy isn't my job.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things that causes them fatigue, because they think it's their job. So they start spinning up here.
Yeah.
That then creates the fight or flight reaction that then starts the draining process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's what I started to see with this, is that, all these things that I thought were my job, well, they're not my job. And actually, the more I see that, the more I actually get to rest in this space of beingness and presence. But I mean, I used to think that if I did that, I wouldn't do anything.
Yeah.
So when I did my apprenticeship, I ended up sort of just feeling really relaxed. And I thought, oh God, I'm not going to get up. I'm not going to do anything.
Yeah.
That isn't what happened.
Of course.
I still got up. I still made my breakfast. I still dealt with my kids. I still went to work. But there was just not the stress.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, there's no relationship between me putting pressure on myself and what I actually go do. And what I actually go do seems to be better now.
Of course. Yeah. That completely resonates. Yes.
Brilliant. Perfect.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
No, you're very welcome. Thanks for coming on the call.
Yeah, you got a great smile.
Oh, bless you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks. How are we doing here, Bonnie? With I know it's just the time right now. Do we just keep going? I'm happy to.
Anybody else has a question or wants to talk? If you're good, I'm good.
Yeah, I'm happy to keep going if there's more out there. What do you think, guys?
Hi.
Hello again.
Hi, Kristen again. Yeah,
Hi,
I just wanted to ask you one more thing. You mentioned a couple times that you have children.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering if you want to say anything around that about, have you ever talked to them about principles, or are you just in the, the general opinion seems to be, just living it, and we'll see it through, we'll just see it through your modeling.
Yeah. Oh, excuse me. When you think you've turned every phone off and you actually haven't? Hopefully that will stop. Bear with me a second. Let me just get that. The answer to your question is, if there's anywhere where I tend to get lost with the principles, it's with my kids. But here's where I've come to with it. So I remember, so if I think back to when we moved here again, my son was really, really upset. And, new town, new friends, new school. And he was really, really upset. And it got to a point where he was crying himself to bed at night. And he's really good at knowing which buttons to press in me. So he started saying things like, oh, you never asked us if we could move. And now I'm missing all my friends. And here I am just going way up into my head and feeling like a real scumbag. And when I was in that space, I tried to fix him, right? So I was like, oh God, yeah, I really got to get him feeling better, because look what I've done. Well, how do you think that went? Not particularly very well. So, I'd start talking to him about his thoughts and where they come from and, how that creates his feeling. And it's just like, but I'm coming from a feeling of trying to fix him. I'm not seeing his well-being. So what shifted for me was when I mentioned earlier about the day my wife and I woke up and were sad, and I realized that just wasn't a problem. So one day Max starts, getting all upset and doing what he does at bedtime. And I just said to him a simple thing. And I just said, you know what, Max, I got sad too. And I still am sad sometimes. And I said, all I can say to you is at some point, you just won't feel sad. But right now, it's just okay that you do. And that was it. And I'd stopped trying to fix him. I realized it was okay that he was having the experience he was having. 3 weeks later, he just shifted and was fine. So I'm not sure that I don't find myself having a lot of success really talking about this. But I do find that the more I understand it for myself, the less I feel I got to do much with them. I mean, I can say more if it's helpful. I've got another example that comes to mind. If you'd like to, yeah. I mean, my daughter is a real firecracker. She's called Layla, and her nickname is Looney in the house. And she can throw tantrums, like she can make her nose bleed by, when she goes into a real tantrum. And I had the same with her. I kept seeing her behavior, and my wife and I kept seeing her behavior as some reflection on our ability to parent. So every time she would go into one of these tantrums, and they were extreme, I mean, she'd throw things and do all sorts, we would try and stop it, and we'd try and fix it, and it just didn't work. Then one day I came downstairs and I saw Layla, throwing one of these tantrums, and Linda was in a mess and she was crying, and I just saw it for what it was. And I realized that, she was just caught up in some angry thinking, and that was it. And that happens to me too. So when I saw it, all I did was I just picked her up. I wasn't cross. I didn't really say anything to her. I just picked her up and I took her to her bedroom, and I sat her down, and I sat myself down, and I just sat with her. And she was yelling and throwing things and messing her room up and all sorts of stuff. And she did try and hit me a couple of times. That was the only thing I stopped her from doing. I didn't stop her doing anything else. Then at some point, she just sat down and she went quiet. And I said to her, I'm going to go get you a glass of water and a tissue because she's covered in snot. So I go downstairs, come back up, and she shut the door. So I knock on the door, and this really quiet voice just says, hold on a minute. I'm like, okay. Then she opens the door, and I see that she's tidied her room, and she comes up to me and gives me a hug and says sorry, and then goes downstairs and does the same thing.
Wow.
Now, it was a reminder to me that when I think about clients I work with, or anybody that I work with, the thing that makes the biggest difference is where I come from, right? Am I in that space of unconditional love? Do I really see that they have well-being? Or am I getting lost in an idea about how, I think they should be? Well, that night with my daughter was the first time I think I really unconditionally loved her as she was. And it was only because of my own grounding and seeing something that was true about me. Well, I can do that too. I get lost in my head. I start lashing out, not like she does, but I start lashing out in my own way when I get lost in that. Well, the same's just happening with her. And anytime anyone tries to get me out of it, all it does is give me more thinking. And if we think about the lady who was talking about the election, all it does is give me more thinking that tells me that I'm not where I should be. And that just winds me up even more. So it's funny, but for me, I find that the more I just see this, it's not so much what I do, it's just more how I show up with them that seems to make the difference. Now, I don't want you going away thinking that I'm some kind of perfect parent, because I'm really not. These are examples of when I've seen it. There are probably many, many more of where I don't, and where my reaction is less than ideal. But hey, that's part of being human, right?
Yeah, and I think there was a real key point in your examples that it's when you get out of the way. Like I find my biggest challenges with parenting are all about my thoughts about my behavior. It's
Yeah.
like thinking, what, you know, they've done this, so therefore I'm a horrible parent.
That's it.
Yeah, and I think that that's a real key. It's about, you know, it's not about me. And yeah, it's coming from.
There's nothing like kids and relationships to show us all the noisy thinking we've got about ourselves and how we think we should be, right? That's why I say, you know, if I'm going to mess it up, it's probably with my kids, because there's just a lot of noise there.
Thank you.
No, you're welcome. Thank you. Anything else?
So we are 5 minutes after the hour, so we can wrap it up if no one else has anything present. I have to say, John, thank you so much. This was really great. Actually, I'm getting a chat. Do you have a few more minutes?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. I just unmuted you, Michelle.
Hello.
John,
Hi, Michelle. How are you doing?
can you see me?
I can't
Hi.
at the minute. I can hear you though.
Yeah? Can you see
Yeah,
me
I can
now?
hear you. Oh, it's you. Hi, Michelle. Hi, how are you doing?
Good.
Good, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Oh,
I was
what's on
just
your mind?
wondering, I'm sorry?
What's on your mind?
You've been just talking about unconditional love,
Yeah.
and I've been having a lot of experience with that lately at work. I never had such a good relationships with people as lately I've been having.
Mm.
I'm especially talking about my colleagues. I really kind of starting to see behind the behavior of people and just really love them for who they are. And even the difficult relationships I had, they just start to change without me doing anything. Just seeing people beautiful and perfect.
Yeah.
But the question is, it's kind of difficult to feel the unconditional love for myself. For other people, it's kind of easy for me. But to really see that, like, I'm really critical of myself. You know, I'm criticizing myself all the time. But that's like a big challenge for me, you know, like.
So, me too at times.
Hmm.
You know, I can be my own worst critic, right? I can really get lost in some pretty nasty thoughts about myself.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you, the thing that has shifted a little bit is that for me, it really looked useful for me at one point to get lost in the critic and the critical thoughts, because it looked to me like that pushed me to do better, right? So it was going to make me more. Now, I don't know if that resonates with you, but it was like the minute I saw that actually that wasn't true, and that it was that idea that was stopping me from just being okay, it just stopped making so much sense. And I think that's often what we do, is we get lost in critical ideas because on some level we think it's going to make us be better and somehow improve our life in some way. But as we look towards the nature of the principles and how they're at work, well, that's not true, because we're already part of mind. We're already part of God, right? So how do I better that? You know, well, to better that, I have to make up a problem and then a solution for it. Well, when I see the made up nature of the whole thing, well, I am where I need to be. Does that resonate or make sense in any way?
Yeah.
You know, we go in and out of it, Michelle. I mean, yeah, there are times when I really get lost in myself. And I think we have to remember that we're having a human experience, right? It's like I said earlier on the call, this does not exonerate us from our humanity, and nor should it. You know, I'm not looking to be some kind of Mr. Spock who doesn't have emotions or anything else. I'm actually much more okay with being human and having this human experience. You know, it's a part of it. So sometimes you're going to go off. Sometimes you're going to, get caught up in it. But I also notice that it's the times when I've been most caught up in it that I seem to learn something new. When I was ill with the chronic fatigue stuff years ago, it was not like it was an easy ride. There was a lot of suffering that happened there, a lot of being in my head. But I can't really be angry at that now, because it's the fact that I really suffered that means that I connect with people. They go, oh, you really went through this? Yeah, I really did. So it's like you're having a human experience. Sometimes you're going to see it, sometimes you're not. Sometimes you're going to get lost in it, sometimes you won't. That's just the game.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, thanks a lot, John. That's really helpful.
You're very welcome. Thanks for coming on the call.
Thank you. Bye.
See ya.
Thank you so much, John. This was really a wonderful webinar. With every conversation, everything you said and everything that all the participants said, I just kept having a me too reaction. And it just really hit me. I mean, I know it's stating the obvious when you understand it, but it just really hit me in a deeper place, how absolutely universal to human beings the three principles are. And just how fortunate I feel to have come across the understanding. So, yeah, me too. So, if you are interested in learning more about John or speaking with him again, when I load the video onto YouTube, I'm going to put John's contact information on there. So you'll be able to contact him directly. And I just want to also mention that the next webinar is November 22nd, Tuesday, with Joe Bailey. And that should be a really great one as well. And unless you have something else to say, we'll just call this an end.
I just want to say thank you very much for showing up and for sharing your questions. And, it's great to be with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
You're very welcome.